Apple in the Enterprise with David Ginsburg, Part 1. This is MacVoices. This MacVoices is supported by OpenCase. MagSafe Perfected. Get 10% off at theopencase.com with the code MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been a little while since we took on the subject of Apple technology in the enterprise. It's something that we dance around on a pretty consistent basis on the live show, but we really haven't sat down and had a conversation about exactly where Apple stands in the enterprise. And it seemed like it's well past time for that. So I couldn't think of anybody better to do that with than Dave Ginsburg of In Touch with iOS, because during his day job, he is hip deep in technology in the enterprise, both Mac and PC. So we're going to try to figure it out. Dave, it's great to have you. Thanks for agreeing to have a little conversation about this.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on this. This is always a fun subject to talk about. There's just always something going on in the enterprise that evolves that a lot of your viewers and listeners probably don't know about. So this is going to be a good topic we can hit and get some people a little understanding of how it goes.
And I think it's important, as technologists in general, but Apple technology enthusiasts, to figure out just where that belongs, because some folks out there are fighting their IT departments when it comes to Apple technology usage within their companies because they want it, and not every IT department is, let's just say, welcoming to that. And I'm not going to, we're going to try to leave some of our advocacy at the door here,
right?
And that applies especially to me. But I do think that it's important to give them a little bit of ammunition to advocate for their positions and let folks know that Apple Tech does have a place in the enterprise. It just may be a very specific place.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think really what's been happening is the actual gaining of traction with the Apple ecosystem in the corporate world. You've got so many different companies out there that are really adopting it 100% in some cases, and in some cases they give you you have a choice of devices, whether you want a Mac or a PC, which is nice. And I think that's really where things are being seen with the enterprise as that goes, because those of us who love working with the Mac don't want to use a PC, honestly, and having that option is awesome. But there are also those challenges too in the in the enterprise as well. Supporting them is one thing. I mean, the return on investment is astronomically great, but the thing is, Macs just work as long as you have the right environment for it to make them to work, So some companies set things up differently than others, but if you just make things work and keep it secure, like conforming to the corporate policies of security, a Mac is just probably safer, honestly, than a PC, in my opinion.
Well, okay, so that sounds like something that an Apple fanboy would say, and I happen to agree with it for a lot of reasons. But the simple fact is that a lot of IT people seem to not feel that way,
right?
And in my personal experience, I feel like sometimes the corporate IT people will take advantage of other people's ignorance and say, those Apple things are not secure without any real backup to it. And so, are there situations now? Let's be clear here. If everything is configured correctly, that's something you and I've talked about here a lot. Yes. Yeah. Assuming everything is configured correctly and that everybody knows what they're doing, there's no reason to believe that Apple Tech, iPads, iPhones, or Macs are less secure than their Windows counterparts.
Well, the thing is, going with Mac, on the Mac side of things, you have to have a mobile device manager tool to be managing those devices. And the most popular one is Jamf, of course. And that's a big tool right there that has to manage the devices, controls what can and cannot be installed. They don't get signed into an Apple ID. You're not using iCloud. Those are the kind of things you do. Corporate environments are going to require virus software or any of the security software that's out there, like a Proofpoint or a CrowdStrike or any of those types of tools, they support Mac too. If you go back 10 years ago, yeah, it was a struggle to get it. You had to be with a tool like a McAfee or a Norton, those two pieces of garbage, in my opinion, that would help secure the device. But the Mac has to follow in the exact same compliance and security that a PC does. There's no way around that. Corporate environments are very vulnerable to that stuff, and you got those cyber hackers that are out there who want to take advantage of that. Thing is, they don't do it as much on Macs. At least you don't hear about them anyway, versus what PCs do. And honestly, if you think about it, with viruses and cyber stuff that's been happening, especially virus software, you would hear it all the time. Oh, we got this Trojan horse, we got this type of problem, we got that type of problem. You don't hear about it as much. It's out there still, but I don't think it's as prominent as it was. I mean, obviously, what happened with CrowdStrike last year, that was quite a big story that shut down a big chunk of companies that were out there because they're at the mercy of Windows and the way it managed it, and then it installed a buggy patch, and then it caused them to blue screen. So aren't going to see that too often on a Mac, at least rare, if at all. But the point is, it's just the nice thing is it's a nice balance. You can have an environment that works both ways, and they work together beautifully. Apple and Mac, they have done a much better job of managing a Mac on the Windows environment, because let's face it, most corporations are going to have a Windows shop. You have to be able to connect to shares. You have to be able to use Microsoft 365, OneDrive, and Azure, Azure AD, which is the back end now of a lot of the support of a corporate environment now, because of the fact that it's on the cloud. I mean, back in the old days, you used Active Directory, you used servers, you used those kinds of things. These days, Azure is probably one of the prominent pieces of the puzzle when it comes to the enterprise, when it comes to supporting all that back end. I mean, including securing your devices too. So, I mean, it can work in conjunction with Jamf being part of that puzzle, and also Azure can be, as well as Intune can be a part of that puzzle too.
And look, I'll say this. I'm not going to speak for you. I'm not a fan of Microsoft. Because but I mean, I want to state that objectively, because I do think that it just feels like it's overly complex and overly not even feature rich, just feature bloat. That said, though, they have done a pretty good job of supporting Macs on Azure and Office and Teams and different things, so that the parity is not always there completely, but it's close enough that you feel like you're not hobbled, or you don't have to apologize to someone and say, "Oh, I'm running a Mac, so that feature doesn't work."
Right. The good thing about Azure is, you have a full inventory of every single device on your network, whether it's connected via Intune or whether it's connected via other methods. But you can find out anybody who has a device that's on the network through Azure and be able to see it, and who it's assigned to, and who is using it, and all that stuff. So that's one of the better things about Azure is management in itself, and being in the cloud is even more of a benefit, because if something were to fail on a system, you might remember the old days, the server went down, we're doomed, what are we going to do? Well, Microsoft has such redundancy across the world. It'll move you over to another server because they have everything replicated all over the world. So there in itself is probably one of the unique things. Jamf does the same thing too with Jamf Cloud. You have things on the cloud now that allows the mobile device manager system be managed over the cloud. So it's backed up out there. You're not doing this on-premise stuff anymore, and having to manage it on a local server where it's best to do it over the cloud. And everybody's adopting cloud these days. So it's just, you can't avoid it anymore.
Which is kind of ironic, given the focus for a long time we had about, let's pull our email server into our office. Let's pull our web server into our office. And I don't think that, first of all, I know the people who are making those decisions had no idea what they were getting into.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we're seeing everything move back out to the cloud where theoretically the professionals are the ones that are maintaining it. And to your point, that if something goes wrong, it's a lot easier to flip a switch and send it over to another server, as opposed to, having one in your back room and it goes bad, and then you got to call FedEx and see
Yeah.
how quickly you can get somebody to deliver one. So a lot of different advantages, but as we've talked about on the show a number of times, that also leads to a lot more security disadvantages.
Yes.
Maybe challenges is a better word.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel like how do Apple devices play into that aspect of things?
Well, yes, they do have a good ability of security. One of the other pieces of the puzzle too, I was going to mention too, is Apple Business Manager. That's an automatic device enrollment. What a corporation or an enterprise would set up is they partner with Apple, and they have all their devices that are registered with Apple Business Manager. Okay, and then what happens is if once you purchase it directly through Apple, it automatically gets registered into Apple Business Manager. Now, they work with other third-party vendors too. It doesn't necessarily have to be through Apple, but Apple makes it the easiest. So then what happens is that device is completely registered to that company. So the big thing is, think about if a Mac or whatever gets stolen. It's a paperweight. It can't be used because once you erase the drive and try to reimage it and try to make it your own machine, it's going to say, "Oh, this is registered to this X company," and move on. And then it's going to start the process, because Apple Business Manager and Jamf work hand in hand. So it sees that, then it'll start the Jamf process and start installing the OS and get everything set up and the apps and however things are configured. So you have that piece of security too. Now, on the other hand, Microsoft and Windows, they're doing a lot of things now too. They have a thing called Autopilot, and the way things are doing now is you can set up a server for on that side of things for Windows, and it does basically the same thing. You work with the vendor, whether it be Lenovo, whether it be Dell or HP, and when you purchase the device, you've signed up with that particular vendor in any of those cases, and a piece is going to be installed on each laptop. So as soon as it boots up, it's going to know that, oh, this was assigned to this company. It starts the boot process, like you're installing Windows for the first time, Windows 11, and you go through it. Very similar to what Mac does. So at least Microsoft has done a really much better job doing that compared to what Mac has been doing for years, because Apple Business Manager has been around for a while, and it's been keeping devices very secure when it comes to the enterprise.
So does Apple Business Manager run on just Macs, or is it all iPad and iPhone as well?
It's iPads and iPhones. If they're a device that's specific to the enterprise, yes, those devices would be part of Apple Business Manager as well.
Today's MacVoices is supported by OpenCase. MagSafe Perfected. Get 10% off at theopencase.com with the code MacVoices. When you think about an iPhone case, you probably don't think about accessories. A case is a case, right? Wrong. That's exactly where OpenCase changes the game. OpenCase is a patented case with a literal open back in the back, and that open space is more than just a clever design. It's the foundation for an entire ecosystem of accessories. Need a wallet? OpenCase has one that fits seamlessly into the back of your OpenCase, cradled so it doesn't slide off like the traditional MagSafe wallets. Prefer to hold your phone? Pop in their pop holder accessory and you've got a secure handle on things. On the go? OpenCase has a car mount charger just for you. Not on the go? Your standby stand keeps your phone visible at all times. Going stealth? A filler plate fills in that open space so it looks like any other case. Power users? OpenCase works with chargers, batteries, and most third-party MagSafe accessories too. And when it's time to charge, Apple recommends you keep nothing between your phone and the charger. Exactly what OpenCase delivers. That means optimized MagSafe charging every single time, no fiddling required. Wallets, stands, chargers, OpenCase makes it all possible. Lighter, slimmer, smarter, and more functional. It's not just a case, it's a platform. Explore the line of OpenCase accessories as well as the OpenCase itself, and get yours today at theopencase.com. Use the promo code MacVoices for 10% off. That's theopencase.com and the code MacVoices for 10% off. Thanks to OpenCase for their support of MacVoices. And you can, and I'm thinking about situations where I just had to leave my company, and my company says, "Look, keep the laptop. It's not.
Yeah.
It's first of all, it's a Mac, and we don't have Mac people. But more importantly, it may just be something they don't want to take back in provision. The Apple Business Manager can be utilized to turn off that ownership key,
Yep.
and let me have the machine as opposed to it being owned by the company.
Right, and that's how it's controlled. So when many enterprise companies do, what they do is they keep it locked down the whole time it's owned. Okay, so then it gets to a point where you have to do it. Working with asset management, you want to dispose of the product, and so you work with a disposal company, whatever vendor you happen to use. That company in turn would go into Apple Business Manager. Then yes, like you said, turn it off. So it's worthless, because Apple Macs have really good resale value in the enterprise. If you retire them after 3 or 4 years, you're going to get a pretty good return on the investment, and put those credits towards buying new equipment, because Macs get slow after time when they're 3 and 4 years old. I know to us, sometimes there's some people that like to keep their Macs 5, 6, and 7 years, which is a little pushing it, in my opinion. But that's a great thing about Apple Business Manager. You have a process in place that's part of it. So once the asset gets turned in, you say, okay, we're ready to put this in disposal. Remove it from Apple Business Manager, and then the machine could be just like it was, prior to it being added, and then it could be anybody could do anything with it at that point. But most of the time, those assets get sent to an asset recovery company, and then they sign a certificate, say, okay, we received these products, it's ours now, and they can do it with what they wish. They could go on the third party market out and resell them, whatever they want to do. But the thing is, then the asset is our hands are washed of it once, or whatever company is washed of it, and then they can get it turned in.
Okay, so you brought up something. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I want to go there anyway, because you're right. There was a time that 2, 3, 4 years old, an old Mac was, frankly, in an enterprise situation, was probably getting to be a little long in the tooth.
Right.
Do you feel like that's still the case with the M series and the power that we've seen come out of that?
It's starting, because we're already there now with M1s, because M1 started it all, of course, and now we're at the M4. It could, I'm still sporting an M1 personally, and the M1s are still out, and many companies that are still using them. They're still perfectly good machines. It's just, the thing is, I think a lot of companies like to have a standardized warranty. Do we keep them 3 years or keep them 4 years? And that's pretty standard in the industry. With any of the PC manufacturers like Lenovo or Dell or HP, it's the same thing. You don't want to go more than 3 years on a PC, because it starts getting slow. The technology changes. Processors have just drastically improved, just like what we look at Mac right now. M4s are the way to go on any Macs at the moment, but we'll talk next year. You'll have M5s, and you'll have M6, and wherever they go in the future. It all depends on the company itself and what the role is that Mac is supposed to be for. For someone who's just doing basic computing, you'd probably be fine with a standard M4. Whereas when you got people in the design world, or you got people that are really high-powered scientists, or anybody who needs high-powered devices, yeah, you're looking at an M4 that's going to be souped back up, and probably a $5,000-$6,000 MacBook Pro that's boosted up with more RAM and bigger solid-state drives. So really, that's where you look at. And most companies these days just have standard issue laptops, and that's what they go with. The basic, like I said, in the Mac would probably be an M4 with 24 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of solid state drive. Maybe they bump it up to 1 gig, 1 terabyte. Depends. You don't really want to have anything bigger than a 1 terabyte drive, only because of backup. You want to be able to do a backup. A lot of times people would probably use something like Dropbox or OneDrive if they're in the Microsoft world. And that's their method of backup. Everything's out into the cloud using one of those cloud-based services. So that's where you got to decide. Those are the decisions a lot of enterprise have to make when it comes to standardizing these laptops.
Yeah, it's funny. In my experience with myself and friends, I seem to run into two kind of managers. The managers who say, we'll just kick it down the road and upgrade, next year. And then next year turns into next year, next year turns into next year. And pretty soon you're running, machines that are not only are they old and relatively slow, but more importantly, the security patches haven't always kept up with them, even for Macs. And that's a little terrifying. Then you get the other people who every 10 minutes it seems like they want to do an upgrade because they feel like they need the latest and greatest. And that too can present its own set of problems as far as migrating things over and making sure everything has the right permissions, because it's a whole different world than it used to be from a permission standpoint. So I do feel like, and this is anecdotal, and you're a better one to say than I think I am. I think you're okay extending your Mac's life out farther than your PCs. But the PCs need to change and flip over unless you are buying really high-end PCs.
Right.
And then you can get away with it. But I feel like so often the non-tech people sort of forget about that we're doing things now. Well, look at AI right now and large language models. All of a sudden, we're asking our machines to do things that on device or not, that they were never designed to do. And that you can take different tasks and work your way backwards, and it's the same thing. But pre-pandemic, there was some video conferencing going on, but it was very limited. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, we all got to go home, and now we need video conferencing. Well, I have a computer at home. It'll do that, right? No,
Yeah. Well, don't bring up that dirty word Teams, and that's how the experience is, depending on the computer that you have, kind of handling the processing power for doing conferences like that. So, I mean, that's why Zoom exploded during the pandemic. I mean, then Zoom kind of leveled itself off now. We both use Zoom all the time now too, and you know what? It's still been a pretty solid product, and it's gotten better. So, I think really what you're looking at when it comes to the remote is, I think standard PCs are okay at this point. I think the rule of thumb on RAM is probably, companies would start with 8 gigs of RAM, then it went to 16 gigs of RAM. Now they got 32. PCs are now going at the 32 gigs of RAM just because the experience of what's the processing. Depends on all the applications that you use too. Do you have in-house applications? Do you have web-based applications? If you're using web-based, you probably don't need a ton of power. It's just all based on, like you said, AI is going to be a big deal, and if you're doing a lot of serious crashing with the large language models, whether it's a ChatGPT or a Copilot or a Gemini, you're going to need machines like that. On the Dell line of PCs, they have their Latitudes, which actually they're changing now. I guess I think about it, they've just changed their names. I can't even remember what they are here. I think it's Dell PC or whatever it's called now. Or the Dell 1 or Dell 1 Pro, or they took out the nomenclature of what Apple uses. But they did have their very pro line products called the Precision, and those were considered the very, very high end. You're comparatively purchasing a standard issue laptop around $1,500. Now you're looking at a Precision that's going to be out at $3,000 and $4,000. I mean, there's desktops out there that I've seen that can be up to $5,000 and $10,000 depending on what you're putting in it, especially the processing power. So it really depends on the of the role and what they do when you make those decisions. But you still got to look at the fact that 3 years is probably about the de facto lifespan on any laptop, depending on the company. You got to look at really large companies like a Boeing, like an IBM, like an SAP. They all have tens of thousands of employees and laptops. It's quite an undertaking to manage that, and they will have corporate rules of that, but there's times where people are way overdue and they suffer, and that's kind of a shame if a company lets that happen, and you have to complain, hey, my laptop's so slow, I can't work anymore, this isn't working. So that's why I would hope most companies have a schedule in place that each year there's a deployment scheduled for however many there is to do. You don't want to be doing them all at once. Trust me, I've been there. When you do one office and you're doing 200 laptops, that's a lot of work and a lot of things to do these days. But that's the way it is. But in a larger company like I just mentioned, tens of thousands of laptops, it's quite an undertaking. You got to span it out over many years. So you try to get them scheduled. So this was the first 3 years, this was the next 3 years, and so on and so on. So you don't have inefficiencies when it comes to that. People, as you know, people kind of just live with what they have. They don't complain. You can't cry about if you don't tell us what the problem is, then why are you suffering? Then don't complain if you're not complaining. So I deal with that all the time. Oh yeah, I've been having this problem for like 2 years. Well, why didn't you tell me about that? And it happens all the time. It's crazy that people just put up with it, and they shouldn't have to. If there's a legitimate issue with the laptop and it's not doing what it needs to do for you, Mac or PC, doesn't matter. Say something. Don't not say something.
And there's a terrible temptation for me right now to say that sounds like a PC user talking about 90% of the time.
Oh, it is.
Because they're used to it. I mean, they're used to things not working and just, okay, I got to work around it, as opposed to, the experience that you and I enjoy where we're used to things working. And if something's not working, yes, I've been known to do workarounds, because of expediency, but for the most part, I want to know what's going on, and it's usually pretty easy to figure out. And the support I think we're seeing from so many different organizations now, the third-party software vendors, is getting better all the time. I mean, because I think now it's becoming table stakes, whereas before it was, well, some were good and some weren't, and now it's if you don't have decent support, and whether that's chat support, email support, live support, you are way behind the 8 ball. Yeah. And you probably aren't going to make it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, you brought up iPhones and iPads earlier. I want to go touch on that a little bit. What the role is going to be with an iPad going forward in the future. I mean, I really think enterprises are going to start looking at them as a much more serious device to use, because you could take an iPad if it's a role that requires you to be out in the field. You're going and visiting different locations. You need to have a battery that's going to last 8, 10, 12 hours. iPads can do that. Take a laptop. Let's face it, Macs are very good with their battery life these days. We're getting 10 hours sometimes of with the newer Macs now within the M4 processor, M3 processors. But the iPad is really going to give you so much more benefit with that alone is the battery life. Now, interfacing it with all of your apps and being able to do things that will work, that's another story. Well, most apps are going to be working. Some enterprises are going to probably want to have developers on staff that are developing apps specific to the discipline of what it's doing. Or you can just use web-based apps, and that's really the trend these days. Is that you're getting web-based apps set up. So all you're doing is going on the web. So you're using Safari to browse, or in the case of enterprise, sometimes you have to use Microsoft Edge as a good example. If you're in the Microsoft world, they got to lock it between the big square, all the four walls. You can't go outside of those walls to be able to access anything on a network. So, of course, these devices have to be registered in Intune. You've got to use Microsoft Authenticator, and you can't browse the web with business apps unless you're using Microsoft Edge in this case. If you're in a Google world, then you would be able to use Google Chrome. You could even lock down Firefox if you want to. That's the beauty about the iPad. You still have the flexibility of having whichever browser that works within the environment of the enterprise and however you want to do it. But like I said, in most cases, many enterprises are in Microsoft Shop, so they're going to do Microsoft 365 and keep it locked down that way.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.